When you think of a nuclear bomb, you imagine the massive shockwave, the inferno that levels cities, and the sheer devastation in seconds. But the real nightmare doesn't come from the blast, it's what follows. Radiation so lethal, it could kill everything in its path for decades. Now imagine a weapon designed not just to destroy, but to make the Earth uninhabitable for generations. Enter the cobalt bomb, humanity's most dangerous creation. Never built, or so we're told, this doomsday device could render the world a radioactive wasteland. How does it work, and could it really end us all? Stay tuned to find out. Ever since the first high-yield thermonuclear weapon design test was conducted on March 1, 1954, as part of Operation Castle, humanity has grappled with the profound implications of harnessing atomic energy. That moment, known as Castle Bravo, marked the dawn of the nuclear age. It also ignited a constant fear of nuclear destruction, a terror that has shaped global politics, defense strategies, and cultural anxieties ever since. And so the concept of a doomsday device was born, a device so powerful that it could destroy all life on the planet and even obliterate the planet itself. Initially referred to as a doomsday machine, this concept intrigued literature, media, and art in general in the 20th century. One of the best-known early examples of this is Stanley Kubrick's 1964 film, Dr. Strangelove. In this film, a doomsday bomb, based on the work of the very real nuclear scientists and physicists Leo Szilard and Herman Kahn, was deployed by accident, extinguishing much of life on Earth. However, in this film, the bomb was activated at the very end, sparing viewers of the spectacle of the long-term impact of the device's detonation. The same can't be said for the readers of the 1957 apocalyptic novel On the Beach by the British author Nevil Shute. This novel was the first to capture the haunting aftermath of a global nuclear conflict with chilling detail. Essentially, the novel's protagonists are just waiting around for their inevitable end as the radioactive fallout from a devastating World War III spreads slowly but inexorably toward their locations. The narrative focuses on the final days of humanity, portraying a poignant and harrowing picture of the world where survival is no longer possible and people must come to terms with the approaching doom. While no remotely similar scenarios have ever unfolded in reality, they very much could. So let's leave behind the world of fiction and turn our attention to the present-day realities of nuclear technology. Before discussing the bomb of all bombs, the cobalt bomb, it's essential to grasp the current landscape of nuclear weaponry, especially since many people tend to lump all nuclear devices into a single category of threat. While this approach isn't inaccurate per se, as all nuclear devices share the same core attribute of harnessing atomic energy for destructive purposes, it overlooks the significant differences in their design, deployment, and intended effects. With this in mind, let's go over the basic types of nuclear bombs. Number 1. Atomic bombs, also known as fission bombs. These are first-generation nuclear weapons and arguably the most common ones. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Little Boy and Fat Man, were in fact atomic bombs. Atomic bombs work by splitting the nuclei of heavy elements like uranium-235 or plutonium-239 through a process called nuclear fission, hence the name fission bombs. This splitting releases a tremendous amount of energy in the form of an explosion, producing a devastating shockwave, intense heat, and radiation. These bombs undoubtedly marked the beginning of nuclear warfare and demonstrated the destructive potential of atomic energy. Number 2. Hydrogen bombs, or thermonuclear bombs. These represent a more advanced generation of nuclear weapons, the second one, and they use both fission and fusion processes. In these bombs, a fission device is used to ignite a fusion reaction. When this reaction takes place, atomic nuclei such as those of hydrogen isotopes fuse to form heavier nuclei. In other words, fusion is the opposite process of fission. This process also releases energy on a far greater scale than fission alone, resulting in a much more devastating explosion. An example of a hydrogen bomb is the infamous Tsar Bomba, the most powerful nuclear weapon detonated to date. This bomb was detonated by the Soviet Union in 1961, producing a mushroom cloud more than 37 miles high and had a yield of 50 megatons, which is about 3,800 times the strength of Little Boy. As a result of the explosion, Severny, an uninhabited village 34 miles away from the detonation site in the Arctic Ocean, was leveled, and buildings located more than 100 miles away were damaged. So it's obvious the hydrogen bombs could easily destroy a whole nation, whereas the world as a whole could be more resistant. That is, at least unless we're talking about cobalt bombs, which are essentially variants of thermonuclear bombs but with a cobalt-60 casing. But more on these world-ending devices later. For now, let's focus on another variant of the hydrogen bomb. Number 3. Neutron bombs. This hydrogen bomb variant is designed to maximize radiation while minimizing the blast effect. It works by using a fusion reaction to release a large amount of neutron radiation, which is highly lethal to living organisms but has less impact on buildings and infrastructure. In other words, the goal of a neutron bomb is to kill people and animals, not destroy cities. This bone-chilling concept was developed by the US during the Cold War to serve as a tactical weapon against the Soviet armored division. However, although a few of these bombs were developed, such as the W-70 warhead, they were never deployed. In fact, all of them were eventually dismantled or decommissioned, largely due to international pressure and arms control agreements that sought to limit the development and use of such devastating weapons. Number 4. Dirty bombs. Though not nuclear bombs per se, these devices do use radioactive material to contaminate an area and take lives. That's why they're also called radiological dispersion devices. While these bombs aren't capable of producing the massive explosions or energy of nuclear bombs, they are certainly more powerful than conventional explosives. Throw the radioactive material and potential to terrorize people into the mix, and you'll understand why dirty bombs are a significant concern in discussions about nuclear and radiological threats. Luckily, these bombs have never been used so far. However, they were tested by Israel in 2015 in an effort to measure the effects of these weapons if they were to be used against the country. With the basic types of bombs covered, it's time to finally focus on cobalt bombs and what makes them stand out against all these devastating devices. To do so, we'll have to introduce another type of nuclear weapon, of which cobalt bombs are also a variant, the so-called salted bombs. Now, these bombs have nothing to do with sodium chloride or any other salt for that matter. The term salted actually refers to how these weapons are manufactured and used to spread contamination. As for the manufacturing part, these bombs contain additional elements compared to standard atomic weapons, giving them a bigger kick. When it comes to the usage part, the name of this bomb has to do with the expression "to salt the earth." This expression dates back to ancient times when conquering armies would scatter salt all over the fields of their enemies to render the land barren and unproductive for generations. In the ancient Near East, salting the earth was considered a curse designed to ensure that the land could no longer support life, thus punishing the enemy with lasting suffering and hardship. There are reports of several ancient and modern cities and areas that have been subjected to this curse in various forms. The ancient North African city of Carthage in 146 BC by the Romans, led by General Scipio Aemilianus, the Italian city of Palestrina in 1299 by Pope Boniface VIII, who ordered it to be plowed and salted, following the old example of Carthage in Africa. The Duke of Aveiro's palace in the Portuguese capital Lisbon in 1759 by the authorities. And now, thanks to the concept of salted bombs, any city on Earth could theoretically join this list. But that city wouldn't be just another entry in a historical account. It would face a modern apocalypse, the beginning of the end. And why? Because salted bombs have been specifically designed to maximize not just the immediate destruction, but also enduring contamination. These weapons are engineered to spread highly radioactive materials over a vast area, ensuring the fallout renders the environment uninhabitable and perpetuates suffering long after the initial explosion. This frightening concept was first described in a radio program by the Hungarian-American physicist Leo Szilard, who we briefly mentioned earlier in this video. But believe it or not, Szilard's goal was not actually to build this weapon of mass destruction. It was to demonstrate that nuclear weapon technology could be manipulated to create a device so powerful that it could end all life on Earth. So rather than trying to doom the world, he was trying to save it. But as things usually go, his concept had unintended consequences. Although he spent the last years of his life passionately advocating for arms control and nuclear disarmament, he had already opened Pandora's box. And what lurked beneath that lid was a terrifying doomsday device. Worst of all, thanks to salting, aka adding radioactive elements like gold-198, cobalt-60, and zinc-65, any large bomb could be essentially turned into a doomsday device. This could even be done with sodium, which becomes intensely radioactive when it absorbs neutrons. According to the physicist W.H. Clark, a 20,000 megaton bomb salted with sodium could contaminate 200,000 square miles so heavily that even people hiding away in shelters would perish. With these horrifying consequences in mind, we're lucky enough that no large-scale salted nuclear bomb has been built so far. However, the theory behind this bomb is still very much alive, serving as a grim testament to human ingenuity and the potential for unimaginable destruction. Now, if this destruction was to take place, how would it unfold? Here's the answer. The salted bomb would explode, leading the added radioactive element to absorb the neutrons released. This process would transform the added element into a highly radioactive isotope, which would be dispersed over a vast area, contaminating the environment with intense, long-lived radiation. How long-lived are we talking about? Well, it all depends on the radioactive element used to salt the bomb. In the worst-case scenario, when cobalt-60 is the element in question, we're looking at several decades, even over a century, before the area could be considered safe for human habitation again. And that's precisely what cobalt bombs are, the worst-case scenario. Now, this might surprise you, as cobalt isn't typically known for being a major player in nuclear weaponry. If anything, this magnetic silver-blue metal is more commonly associated with industrial applications such as batteries, magnets, and high-strength alloys. Believe it or not, cobalt-60 has also been used to treat cancer. Yes, you heard that correctly. The element that has an unprecedented potential to destroy lives has also been used to save them. How is that possible? Well, the gamma radiation cobalt-60 emits can also be harnessed for medical applications. This was done back in 1951, when one of the first cobalt-60 bombs was built in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, by a team of scientists and one stellar machinist. The development of this device was procured due to a high rate of cancer deaths in Saskatchewan between 1924 and 1941. So in 1949, Tommy Douglas, then Premier of Saskatchewan, greenlit the development of a cobalt bomb for medical purposes. Although there were two devices being developed roughly at the same time, one in Saskatoon and the other in London, Ontario, the former was the first one to successfully treat a cancer patient. This device, officially known as the cobalt-60 beam therapy unit, worked by attacking the tumors lying deep inside the patient's body. This way, it reached otherwise inaccessible tumors, shrinking or outright destroying them without the need for invasive surgery. The first Saskatoon patient, a 43-year-old mother of 4, lived another 47 years after being treated for cervical cancer by a calibrated dose of the cobalt-60 radiation. Another 6,728 patients were treated by the cobalt-60 beam therapy unit before it was replaced in 1972. This impressive achievement begs the same question once again: how can the same element possess such a duality of power? One side capable of saving lives and the other harboring the potential to bring unimaginable destruction. Well, the second side takes over once cobalt-60 is unleashed in an uncontrolled, weaponized form. This isotope is highly unstable and radioactive, with a half-life of about 5.27 years. If you're unsure what this means, it means that cobalt-60 decays at a rate where after 5.27 years, half of the radioactive material remains active. And even after one half-life passes, danger doesn't disappear, as the remaining material still emits deadly amounts of gamma radiation, not the carefully controlled and calibrated doses used in medical treatments. It takes multiple half-lives, typically around 10, to reduce the radioactivity to a relatively safe level. That's why bombs salted with cobalt-60 cause decades-long devastation. To understand just how long cobalt-60's half-life truly is, all you need to do is compare it to other radioactive elements that could be used to salt bombs. We mentioned zinc-65, which has a half-life of only 244 days. There's also tantalum-182, whose half-life lasts 111 days. Another isotope we mentioned, gold-198, decays after only 2.7 days. Sodium-24 does it even quicker, with a half-life of just 15 hours. So you see, some of these isotopes might be more radioactive than cobalt-60 initially, but they decay faster. This means they might even allow some populations to survive in shelters deep underground. But not cobalt-60. No isotope can even come close to the sheer duration of the danger posed by cobalt-60, a danger fully able to wipe out generations of people wherever they might be hiding. How would this happen? Well, we pretty much explained the process when describing how salt bombs work. In most designs, a cobalt bomb is nothing but a hydrogen bomb encased in cobalt-60. So when the bomb detonates, the casing or the layer of cobalt-60 surrounding its core is vaporized and ejected. As the cobalt-60 particles cool and condense, they form radioactive fallout that begins slowly drifting back down towards Earth over a wide area, contaminating the ground, water, and air. Again, we're in luck, as no large-scale cobalt bomb has ever been built or atmospherically tested, as far as is publicly known, of course. However, there have been two small-scale tests that involve cobalt in one way or another. The first of them, Operation Antler Round 1, took place in 1957 at the Taji site in the Maralinga Range in Australia. Although the test was conducted in Australia, it was conducted by the British government, which sought to gain insights into nuclear weapon performance and safety. The bomb tested during this operation used cobalt pellets as a radiochemical tracer, aiming to understand the behavior of this element in a high explosive environment. The bomb ended up having a yield of about 1.5 kilotons of TNT, with a cloud that rose above 9,500 feet, which was a little higher than expected. After the explosion, the cobalt pellets scattered all over the landscape, to the shock of many personnel, as they weren't even informed this isotope element was going to be used. In general, this British test was considered a failure, and they never again repeated a similar one, despite reports that they were developing a cobalt bomb. The second nuclear test involving cobalt took place in 1971 as part of the 1971 Pechora-Kama Canal project carried out by the Soviet Union. Interestingly, cobalt wasn't initially the focus of the test. High amounts of cobalt-60 were generated from the steel surrounding these so-called Taiga nuclear devices. In the time that's passed since, the vegetation in the test area has mostly returned to normal. Since then, there have been whispers that the Russians eventually did manage to build a cobalt bomb, a doomsday device rigged to explode if the country was ever to be nuked, taking the rest of the world with it. However, these are just whispers for now. There's no concrete evidence or official confirmation that a functional cobalt bomb was ever developed or deployed by Russia. However, there has been some evidence that the country was developing a cobalt torpedo titled Oceanic Multipurpose System Status 6, or simply Status 6. The evidence in question came from a Russian state TV broadcast showing a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his military chiefs in 2015. During this broadcast, the cameraman accidentally captured a document that appeared to describe the Status 6 system. Of course, we place special emphasis on the word accidentally, as Russia is known for its calculated display of military capabilities which, more often than not, don't even exist. However, in this case, it appears that the project is indeed real, as the Pentagon officially acknowledged it in 2018. The project has since been renamed Poseidon and successfully tested. For now, the cobalt warhead part of the project is still speculation, but from the specifications we do know, one thing's for sure: Poseidon is a force to be reckoned with. This torpedo, or torpedo-shaped robotic mini-submarine to be precise, can travel at speeds of up to 115 miles per hour with a range of 6,200 miles and a maximum depth of 3,300 feet. The warhead, speculated to include cobalt, is approximately 5 feet in diameter and 13 feet in length, giving a volume of 250 cubic feet. Comparing these figures to those of the almighty Tsar bomber, which measured about 6 feet in diameter and 26 feet in length, it's easy to conclude that Poseidon's warhead should be capable of producing a yield of at least several tens of megatons. Some reports suggested that the yield in question can reach 100 megatons. By now, we probably don't have to explain the sheer scale of devastation such a warhead would bring about if it turned out to truly be a cobalt bomb. But for the sake of dramatizing the very real danger these bombs could pose to the world, let's examine the destruction and nuclear fallout they could lead to beyond the warhead attached to Russia's Poseidon. First things first, how many megatons of cobalt bombs would it take to effectively end the world, killing everyone in it? In theory, about 50,000 megatons. That's approximately 1,000 Tsar bombers. Now, this number might sound unreachable, but keep one thing in mind: the US and Russia currently possess over 5,000 nuclear warheads each. Also, building new cobalt bombs wouldn't be too difficult. Essentially, all you need is a standard hydrogen bomb and a thick layer of cobalt-60. With this in mind, here's how the end of the world would play out. Phase 1. The unleashing of devastation. The cobalt bomb detonates with catastrophic force. The immediate aftermath would be a blinding flash of light and a massive shockwave, flattening everything within a vast radius. This initial explosion would release an overwhelming amount of radiation, creating a fireball that incinerates all life within its immediate vicinity. Buildings would be vaporized and the land scorched beyond recognition. Phase 2. The fallout begins. The immediate destruction caused by the cobalt bombs is just the beginning. As they detonate, they also disperse a massive amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Cobalt-60, which was created by the explosion, becomes a deadly cloud of fallout. Initially, the gamma radiation from the fission products included in the bomb is intensely hazardous, beating the one from cobalt-60. In the first hour, radiation levels from these products are 15,000 times more intense than one would experience from cobalt-60. Within a week, this intensity reduces to 35 times more. After a month, it's 5 times higher, and by 6 months, it's approximately equal to the radiation from cobalt-60. But this is where the true horrors of cobalt bombs begin. Phase 3. Long-term catastrophe. After 6 months, the radiation levels from cobalt-60 become 8 times more intense than the fission products, and by 5 years, they're a staggering 150 times more intense. This has to do with the isotope's half-life of 5.27 years, which allows its deadly radiation to persist. For perspective, if a cobalt bomb causes a dose rate of 10 sieverts per hour, anyone exposed without shelter would receive a lethal dose within about 30 minutes. Even those in well-built shelters would only be safe temporarily as the radiation penetrates and continues to spread. After one half-life, or a little over 5 years, the radiation would drop to 5 sieverts per hour, making a lethal dose possible with 1 hour of exposure. After 10 half-lives, roughly 53 years, the radiation would reduce to about 10 millisieverts per hour. This level might seem less immediately deadly, allowing for about 4 days of exposure before acute radiation syndrome symptoms appear. However, this radiation level still significantly increases the risk of cancer over long-term exposure. Remember, this is 53 years after the initial explosion. Phase 4, a century of contamination. Move further into the future. After 20 half-lives, about 105 years, the dose rate would drop to around 10 microsieverts per hour. While this level is similar to the background radiation that people experience naturally, it remains higher than normal levels and could slightly increase the risk of cancer. Finally, after 25 half-lives, around 130 years, the radiation would decay to less than 0.4 microsieverts per hour. At this point, the area would be considered mostly safe, although radiation levels would still be detectable. Any life on the planet, on the other hand, wouldn't. Now, there is a chance that some parts of the world would remain relatively unaffected by the fallout, as it isn't always evenly deposited downwind from the detonation. However, if someone is hell-bent on destroying the world, there's always a workaround. All you need to do is explode the cobalt bombs at higher altitudes, and the fallout will become much more widespread. Why? Because the radioactive isotopes will get caught in the natural meteorological processes, such as high-altitude winds and weather systems, which can distribute the fallout over a much larger area than a ground-level detonation would. The result? The effective destruction of usable water. In other words, even if some people manage to avoid immediate exposure, the contamination of water sources would mark their end in the long run. But what do you think? Do you still have a slither of hope that humanity can survive even a cobalt bomb? Perhaps enough people could find shelter in deep caves and bunkers far underground? Or is this all a futile exercise in optimism, overshadowed by the overwhelming challenges of long-term survival and environmental devastation? Share your theories in the comment section below. Fingers crossed, we never have to find out for real. Now go and check out Russia's top nuke targets, or click this other video instead.